So I'm going to invite you both to go up to the podium. Now, this morning you get a break from me. Yay! You're going to get the sermon, as we call it, in Spanish this morning. So John's going to be very happy because he can speak Spanish. And some of you may be a little confused, which is why Uriel is here, because he's going to translate for you. Some time ago, the Uriel and some the students from the Coalition of Immokalee Workers came and spoke to the Alachua County Faith Leaders Alliance and told us of the plight of the farm workers. Now, I've come from England, so I know not a lot about this. I'd heard a little bit, I'd seen the signs, tomatoes and Wendy's, and didn't know a lot else about it. And then they spoke, and I was horrified. And I pray that as they speak this morning, that you will hear the truth of the story and why social justice for us and for Jesus seemed to be radical, but actually, as I put out on the front gate this morning, social justice is fundamental. So please welcome Uriel and Leonard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Leo. I'm working with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. Thank you for this time.
Hello everyone, my name is Uriel, and I work with Interfaith Action of Southwest Florida, and I'm going to be interpreting for Leo.
Quiero agradecer por este bonito servicio.
So first we want to say how grateful we are for being invited to speak here in your sanctuary and for this really beautiful service and for the energy that we've seen today.
Y también quiero compartir quiénes somos nosotros como un grupo de trabajadores que estamos en Florida.
And today we're going to share a bit about the work that we do, who we are, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, and the issues that we face here in our own backyards here in the state of Florida.
Y la razón por qué estamos con ustedes.
And the reason as well as to why we're here in Gainesville.
En 1993 nace un grupo de trabajadores luchando para defender sus derechos.
Back in the early 90s, 1993, as a matter of fact, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers was founded, and it was founded to fight and struggle for rights of farm workers in Florida's agricultural industry.
Donde existían muchos abusos, donde nadie le importaba lo que estaban viviendo los trabajadores, y eso viene en el bajo salario.
And for some context, what we were struggling against was the abuses that workers would face day in and day out when bringing the food that we all consume every day. And on top of those abuses, the sub-poverty wages that workers were getting paid for this hard work.
Un ejemplo muy claro, el salario de un trabajador no es por hora, se vale por lo que es la cantidad de producción que hacen.
One example of the struggles that farm workers face is even in their wage. For example, workers, although legislated to get or to receive a minimum wage, often get paid a piece rate by the amount of produce that they pick, which is often under the minimum wage.
Y nosotros traemos estas cubetas, eso pesa 32 libras.
And that's why we brought the buckets today, if you've seen them. And right up front, we have a 32-pound bucket, which is about the average of what a farm worker picks.
Esto es la cubeta que usamos.
This is the bucket that we use.
Uno lo tiene que llenar y ponerlo al hombro, ahorita está muy lleno.
You fill it up and then you toss it up on your shoulder, and right now it's a bit too full.
Y uno tiene que correr como 50 a 100 pies.
And when you're done filling up your bucket, you run 50 to 100 feet to the end of a row where there's a truck collecting all of the produce. You toss it up there, and then the person gathering it there puts a token into your bucket, and that's how they keep track of how much you're going to get paid.
El promedio hoy en día es de 50 centavos.
And on average, a farm worker today earns about 50 cents for that 32-pound bucket.
Eso una de las razones por qué nace la lucha de los trabajadores.
And so it's for those reasons, and with that context, why the CIW was founded.
En 93 hubo 95, hasta el 2000 hubo marchas, paros laborales en Immokalee.
In the 90s, there were all types of actions that we took on. Marches, 200-mile marches, to meet face-to-face with the growers, labor stoppages, and even hunger strikes by 6 workers who went on a hunger strike for 30 days.
Donde nadie sabía de los trabajadores, simplemente era una lucha de los trabajadores.
And at that time, we realized that a lot of people just were not aware of the conditions that farm workers were facing when they eat and weren't thinking about the conditions that their food comes from.
Después salimos de Immokalee, ir directamente en diferentes iglesias para crear lo que es conciencia.
And then when we realized this, we started heading out of our Immokalee community, visiting churches around Southwest Florida area to explain the reality that farm workers were facing.
Y la realidad de los trabajadores, restaurantes de comida rápida, de supermercados, tenían un beneficio sobre esto y una ganancia enorme sobre esto.
And what we had realized was that there were parties in the agriculture industry that were getting significant profit from the abuse and exploitation that we were facing in our community.
Al trabajador le exigen el tamaño, el color del tomate, pero nunca sus derechos.
When you go to the fields, the growers tell you, we want you to pick a specific color, a specific size, a specific texture, a specific amount, at a specific time. And these demands come directly from these corporations. Yet, one of the demands that they don't have is that farm workers get treated fairly when doing this work.
Entonces, presionamos a los grandes compradores de tomate en el 2001.
And so, along with faith communities and student communities across the country, we pressured these corporations to demand that they be held responsible for the conditions that their food that they sold and make a significant profit from, that they be treated fairly.
Y nace la campaña por comida justa, boicoteando a Taco Bell por 5 años.
And we started what is now known as the Campaign for Fair Food. And we started with Taco Bell at that time.
Y hoy son 14 corporaciones que han aceptado nuestras 3 demandas.
Today, those small farm workers from Immokalee, Florida, a town that many of you might not even know where it's at, are now working with 14 multi-billion-dollar corporations to end abuses in their supply chain.
Que aceptaron nuestras demandas.
And they have all accepted the demands of the Immokalee workers.
Un aumento de 1 centavo por cada libra de tomate que paguen ellos al ranchero para aumentar el salario de los trabajadores.
I mean, these demands are quite simple, that each corporation pay 1 penny more per pound of tomatoes that they purchase, and that penny is given to the growers and then disseminated to the farm workers in that field.
Que compren tomate donde vamos a crear nuevos derechos de los trabajadores.
The second demand is that they sign legally binding agreements purchasing from farms where there's mechanisms in place to protect against gender-based violence, against modern-day slavery.
Ejemplo, la discriminación siempre ha estado en la industria agrícola.
For example, instances of discrimination have always existed in the agricultural industry.
Antes te podían discriminar por tu edad, por tu religión o por tu género.
In the past, in our Immokalee community, you were often discriminated by your age, by your race, or by your gender.
Los trabajadores dicen, tenemos que crear esta industria más justa donde todos somos iguales.
And then the workers decided, enough is enough. We have to make this industry one where we're treated with dignity and with respect, and where everyone is treated with equality.
Y hemos logrado eso después de 25 años de lucha.
And after 25 years of struggle, we can honestly say that we are creating that.
El 90% de la industria agrícola hemos creado el programa por comida justa.
Today, 90% of Florida's tomato industry is participating in a program now called the Fair Food Program,
donde los trabajadores tienen una voz y cero tolerancia a discriminación y acoso sexual y esclavitud moderna.
where workers, for the first time ever, have a voice in the fields and can speak out against any abuse that they may find. And there's zero tolerance policy for sexual violence, zero tolerance policy for modern-day slavery.
Y hemos logrado eso gracias a diferentes iglesias o congregaciones que han unido en esto.
But we haven't been able to do this alone. We've done it together with congregations across the country who have united themselves and supported the work of the CIW.
Que nos hacían un servicio como lo que estamos viendo ahorita, el tema, lo que crea la conciencia dentro de una comunidad.
By doing things like what we're doing today, right now, giving us the opportunity to create consciousness and awareness about what farm workers face.
Y es lo que necesitaban los trabajadores.
And that's what the farm workers needed.
14 corporaciones está involucrado lo que es
14 corporations are now participating in this program.
está Taco Bell, McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, Chipotle, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Walmart, Stop and Shop y Giant son compradores al resto.
All of these corporations are participating in our program today.
Y entonces podemos decir que la industria ahorita de tomate es más justa que antes.
And today we can honestly say, as we mentioned, that Florida's tomato industry is just, and it has been well recognized because of this. Actually, the United Nations recognize the Fair Food Program as the best workplace protection for farm workers in the world.
Y también, gracias, como mencionaba, personas que han mandado cartas, que han marchado con nosotros.
But like we mentioned, this isn't in part just of us. We've had many supporters sending postcards, marching alongside the Immokalee workers, all demanding that workers be treated fairly, all in God's image.
Y nuestra campaña sigue. Hoy estamos presionando la Universidad UF porque ellos tienen un Wendy's y Wendy's es una de las corporaciones que no quiere participar.
And today, however, our campaign continues. Our program protects about 50 to 60,000 farm workers a year, but there's still hundreds of thousands of farm workers that face the conditions that we used to face in our Immokalee community in the 90s. And one of these corporations that isn't participating is that, I don't know if y'all seen a picture already, is Wendy's.
Ellos dejan de comprar tomate en Florida hace 3 años, 2 años, se van para México.
About 3 years ago, we went up to them and said, join this program, protect the workers in your supply chain, pay that penny more per pound. And instead, their response was to shift to purchase in Mexico.
Y en México existe lo que es la explotación y ahora ellos saben eso y por eso estamos presionando Wendy's. Vamos a tener diferentes eventos en la siguiente semana.
And in Mexico, there's very well documented cases of children as young as 7 working in the fields that Wendy's purchases from. And modern day slavery at a rampant rate, at the rate that we used to see it in our community.
Y vamos a tener más información en la mesa después del servicio. Vamos a tener.
And it's for that reason why we're here in Gainesville. The University of Florida here is a top 5, or wants to be a top 5 institution in the country. Well, there's a department where they're already top 5. They're actually number 1, and it's their agricultural department. Yet, if you were to look for farm workers when you're picking a class or farm worker justice, the only mention of farm workers is as a labor supply, as a labor source, whether or not there's too little or too much of it, but never as a group that is facing gender-based violence at a rate of 4 out of every 5 farm worker women, or a labor force that is facing modern-day slavery. And so, for that reason, we're demanding that, 1, the University of Florida do better and stop doing business with a corporation that is profiting from the exploitation of farm workers. But 2, for the University of Florida to step up and to join a program that has been created in their own backyard. But for more information on that, we're going to be tabling during the potluck. So if you want to stop by and get any information, we've got some flyers and more info there as well. But we do want to invite you all to a march and a rally. Currently, as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, about 70 farm workers left Immokalee and are driving right now to North Carolina on a tour to pressure all of these universities to stop doing business with Wendy's. And they're having rallies and demonstrations at each location. On March 14th, from 12:30 to 2:30, we're going to be doing that here in Gainesville. And we hope that if you're available that you can join us because these farm workers need your support. And so thank you for the opportunity.
Amen. one of the things that when we talk about abuse, you did a very good job of just mentioning it, but I would like for you to just share a little more of what that actually looks like, because I don't think people realize. Gracias.
Sí, hemos un ejemplo claro de una compañera que llegó hace de 14 años cuando llegó.
One clear example of the abuse that farm workers often face is a well-documented story by a farm worker. Her name is Alejandrina. She came to Immokalee back in the 1990s at age 14.
Llega a trabajar en la industria agrícola y lo primero que le hacen a ella o el patrón básicamente es pedirles favores sexuales.
When she came into the fields, she was working there in the fields. At that time, it was very rampant for people as young as 14 and even younger to be working in the fields. And as soon as she got to the fields, one of the crew leaders, one of the supervisors, put her to the side and said, I can give you a better job, but with the added clause of demanding a sexual favor.
Entonces, en ese caso, pues ella se niega y también otros compañeros que están en trabajo le ayudan para atender a ella.
And so she refused to take part in any of this, but he insisted. And so he sexually assaulted her, but another farm worker was there and heard her screaming and got involved.
Al siguiente día son despedidos del trabajo.
On the next day, both of them lost their jobs.
Y eso es la cara de la industria agrícola antes. Si tú reclamas es porque te vas a despedir o vas a ser golpeado.
And that was the face of the agricultural industry and how it dealt with issues like this. If you weren't okay with the abuse and spoke out, you would lose your job.
Si uno intenta, por ejemplo, ir a tomar agua, o me siento cansado y voy a ir a tomar agua.
There's also another instance back in the 90s of a farm worker who stopped working and wanted some water. We all know how it is to be working here in the state of Florida, 90-degree weather for 8-10 hours.
Y lo que le dicen, si vienes a trabajar o tomar agua.
And the response by one of the supervisors was, do you come here to drink water or do you come here to work?
Empieza a golpear a un trabajador guatemalteco de 18 años.
And so this farm worker ignored it and felt he was in his right to go drink some water. He was 18 years old, an indigenous farm worker from Guatemala, and he went to go drink this water. That supervisor then went on to physically assault him and beat him up to a pole.
El trabajador fue a la oficina de la coalición con la camisa bañada de sangre.
That farm worker, having heard of the CIW, I would add there's a community radio station that the CIW has where they talk about farm worker rights and protections and who to go to. Having heard of the CIW through the community radio station, went to the office completely bloody with his bloody shirt still on.
Entonces, y no hubo ninguna consecuencia sobre eso. Simplemente ellos dicen, no voy a pagar mi multa con la policía de $500 y vuelvo a pegarte cuando quiera.
And there was no consequences for when physical assault happened. They would just pay their fine, pay their court costs, and still have a job to go to.
Entonces, esa es una manera que hemos visto y hay muchas historias que vemos en nuestra comunidad.
And so these are some of the cases that unfortunately were far too often the cases that workers would face in the agriculture industry. But I would add, this is actually nothing new. Agriculture here in the state in this country has forever been rooted in exploitation. First in slavery, and now in the way that they treat migrant workers. And so it has always been an industry that exploits and treats workers as machines and as tools, as disposable.
Y eso es una de las razones como nosotros queremos eliminar y prevenir diferentes tipos de abusos con el poder de las corporaciones.
And it's for this reason, with this context, why we started going to these corporations. Instead of being reactive to every case that would come up and dealing with every case as they came, we wanted to be proactive, to go preventative. And that's how we do it with the power of these corporations.
Dejarán de comprar si existen casos de más extremos en la industria agrícola que participan en el programa.
These 14 corporations, if there were an instance of sexual violence like what happened to Alejandrina, or physical assault like what happened to that other farm worker, those corporations would cease doing business with that farm immediately, and that farm would be suspended from this program.
Entonces tenemos un programa que está expandiendo en 7 estados y tal vez en otros países.
And so what that means is that these farms are proactive. If there's bad apples working there, they get rid of them, because now the moral and the ethical decision also becomes their financial decision. And unfortunately, most often than not, the financial reasoning moves people more than the ethical reasoning. And today, however, as we mentioned, today this is virtually eradicating these issues in the farms that are participating. And we started in Immokalee, Florida, and in the state of Florida. But now we've expanded to 7 other states up the East Coast, following the migrant trail that most farm workers follow. Once the season is over here, they travel up north to work in other industries and other produce.
Y hoy en los ranchos que están participando es más buscado con los trabajadores, con las trabajadoras, o no importa quién sea.
And today, what we hear from the farm workers themselves is that Fair Food Program farms are the preferred employer. Folks, be it women, be it transgender folks, they know that in Fair Food Program farms, they're going to get treated fairly and that they have rights, and so they look to work in those farms.
Y ellos tienen el derecho de poner una queja sin que sean despedidos. Esa es una de las razones como hemos eliminado.
And today, workers, instead of having this culture of silence, where no one would speak out because you would lose your job or you might be physically assaulted, we're ending that culture of silence, and workers can speak out without fear of retaliation. But in order to do that, we have to put the mechanisms in place. There is a 24/7 hotline where a worker can call in Haitian Creole, in Spanish, in indigenous language, anonymously if they wish so, and put their complaint and understand that someone will get to it and that someone will deal with that issue.
Gracias. One more question.
Yeah.
I've got a bad wing at the moment. So I'm just going to try. Oh my God. So later on, maybe some of you might want to check me out. How many of those buckets a day do you need to fill to be able to even start to pay bills?
That's a great question.
En un día bueno, un trabajador puede hacer hasta 160 cubetas.
On a good day, a farm worker would be able to pick about 170 of these buckets. I would add, that would be well over 2 tons of tomatoes that one farm worker would pick.
El equivalente de ganar el salario mínimo de la Florida.
And that would be more or less the equivalent of earning Florida's minimum wage.
Whoa. In 90-degree heat and humidity.
Pero hay días que puedes hacer 50 nada más porque no hay mucho tomate.
But the thing about agriculture, specifically with tomatoes, is that there's not confirmed work. So it's not as if you have a 9 to 5 and you know that you have set work. One day it may be raining, and so you cannot pick tomato produce once it's raining. The plant rots, and so you may only pick 20 buckets one day, and one day you pick 107.
En Immokalee es muy popular de decir el primer día o 2 días es para pagar mi vivienda.
In Immokalee, there's a saying that the first 2 days of work are to pay for your housing.
El segundo es para comer.
The third is for food.
Y el tercero es para guardar, ahorrar o para mandar.
And then the rest is to send back home to your family.
Y en Immokalee se paga la vivienda cada semana.
And in Immokalee, unlike most folks, you pay for your housing weekly. To explain this, as we mentioned, most of the workers are migrant workers, right? So when you sign a lease, how long do you usually sign a lease for?
A year.
Most workers are in Immokalee for about 6 to 8 months. And so for that reason, leases become inaccessible. But on top of that, they require certain forms of IDs. Some farm workers don't have access to these forms of IDs, and therefore they find housing in places that charge them exorbitant rates at a weekly.
Y uno puede pagar, ahorita es normal de $75 por semana por una cama que puedes tener 4 o 5 compañeros en un cuarto.
And so today, you would pay $75 a week. But this is not for your own bed and for your own bathroom and for your own kitchen. This is for a space in a trailer home that you may be sharing with 4, 5, 6 other workers.
Entonces, pero el problema viene en lo que es el salario que enfrentan los trabajadores.
And what we see that is directly correlated with the sub-poverty wages that workers continue to get paid.
Y ya los demás empiezan a aprovechar de la situación de los trabajadores.
What we see is that the agricultural community and farm workers are one of the most vulnerable and preyed upon communities in this country.
Thank you. Please, how radical would Jesus be? Jesus would have headed up that coalition of Immokalee workers. Would you please
Como dice un compañero de nosotros, si Jesús estuviera o regresara, seguro que estuviera marchando con nosotros.
So just as you mentioned, there's a farm worker, a member of the CAW, who says, whenever Jesus comes back, you might find him marching alongside the Immokalee farm workers.